Welcome to the Hastings Shadmehry Show with your hosts, Andee Hastings and Mali Shadmehry. Dive into the heart of family law as Andee and Mali bring clarity to legal challenges, celebrate client victories, and share the wisdom of their combined expertise. Get ready for a journey into empowerment and advocacy right here where your story matters.
Hello, and welcome to the Hastings Shadmehry Show, where we delve into the heart of family law and the stories that shape our lives. I'm Mali Shadmehry, and joining me is the ever insightful, intelligent, and beautiful Andrea Dyer Hastings. How are you today, Andee?
I am great, actually.
She's embarrassed by me.
I'm never embarrassed by you.
I have had my coffee today. Can you tell? Always have my coffee. So today we are so excited to talk to you about the marital residence, your home, real property. How do we treat it in a divorce? Kind of what are the options for the marital residence? Kind of make some reason on this topic for you. And we've categorized sort of into different components, how the marital residence can be treated in a divorce. So with that, we are going to start with Andee. Talk to us about option number one. What if we just filed for divorce? Let's say the divorce is actually pending and we both still live in the house and it's kind of going okay and we want to do that. Talk to us about that option. Can both people live in the house during the divorce?
The quick answer is yes. Definitely both people can live in the house during the divorce. It's not unusual for folks to have difficulties, and we'll get to that. But sometimes for financial reasons, emotional reasons, and otherwise, people decide that the best option while they're going through the divorce and figuring out what their future financial situation will be and where they're going to live and what's going to happen and where the kid's going to be, the option, the most logical option, I find, is that they stay in the home together. They continue to operate financially the way that they have previously. Usually they'll take separate bedrooms. Obviously, if there's a basement, somebody might move into the basement to create a little bit of separation. But sometimes to keep consistency for the children, I think, while the case is pending, people opt to continue to live under the same roof. Is that what you see?
It is. I think that we've talked about it before, but, generally nobody's better off financially during a divorce or after a divorce. We're splitting up finances. And now on top of it, during the pendency of the case, both parties are spending money on lawyers. So a lot of times, if families don't have the income or assets to sort of warrant splitting off into two separate households while the divorce is pending, they can live under the same roof. For me, it's a little bit more rare because you're going to see me dealing with a lot of more contentious cases where there's abuse, Andee as well. And, sometimes that doesn't work. And we've talked about that in other episodes, that you can have a hearing during the pendency of your case to get one party removed. And that's kind of a different topic. That's not what we're talking about here. This means, for all intents and purposes, you guys are okay to live under the same roof. You can make it work. You can maintain status quo. And there is, in Georgia, a court order that goes into place that dictates how you guys need to act and not harass one another. And basically, I'm saying there's court order that says behave yourselves. So if someone stops behaving themselves while you'll live under the same roof, there's some added protection there. And financially, I always like it and think the divorces are the most cost efficient when parties can maintain the financial status quo while they remain under the same roof while the divorce is being finalized. Keep paying your bills how y'all have been paying them. Don't change it up. You end up spending a lot more in legal costs if we have to rearrange the entire financial dynamic right away. So that's usually the most smooth course. But as Andee said, and I think it takes very emotionally intelligent parties to be able to do that. Sometimes there's a lot of fireworks, and when children are involved, we want to keep a peaceful environment, obviously. So it's a special kind of client and kind of party dynamic that can accomplish that. But I would say that my tendency is always to educate my clients, make sure they know that's going to be your most cost-efficient approach. Just maintain status quo till we get to the end. And then one little spicy note I'm going to add. It's really a topic for another day as well. Andee mentioned a lot of our clients stay in separate bedrooms once they separate. Just keep in mind, at least in Georgia, I don't know the law across the country on this, but in Georgia, once the divorce is pending and it's been filed, you guys cannot have sex with one another. Procedurally, it could cause a big issue. It could cause your whole divorce to be dismissed, kicked out. That's a waste of money. And I've had it happen before, and that it happens. People sleep together after they've initiated the divorce proceedings. And just be aware that if that happens, you're going to spend more in legal costs to get that handled in court. So if you're going to share a house, behave yourself, do not have sex with each other, and do not record each other. Do not have cameras up watching what people are doing. You're creating an environment that's just going to fuel litigation. So do it carefully, but generally it's more cost efficient if we can just maintain status quo and be adults. So anything else on that one?
Well, obviously there are situations, many, and you alluded to it, that do not lend themselves to people staying under the same roof during the divorce. Sometimes one person's ready for a divorce, the other one's not. If they're not in the same emotional place, obviously, if there is domestic violence, staying under the same roof is absolutely not an option, and we would normally take steps very quickly to address that. But, there's a lot of situations in which it's not possible. It is our job to educate our clients on that option and kind of how it looks from a financial standpoint as well as an emotional standpoint while the case is pending. But it's more common that we find that people are not able to live under the same roof.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about another sort of scenario that we see, or as Andee says, scenario. We pronounce it differently. We do. It's one of my words that I love when Andee says it. So this scenario would be this. We have a divorce pending, but we are not candidates to live under the same roof. And let's say we already went to a hearing, you've heard me mention that, where we asked the judge to make one party leave, and the judge said yes. Okay, can you talk to us about what does the financial arrangement usually look like when that happens? How do we treat the house as an asset during the pendency of a case when one person stays in it and one does not?
So, and a lot of people have this question even before they file, which is, if I leave the home, do I lose my interest in the home? Am I conceding that the other party is going to get the home on a final basis? Do I lose any rights? And the answer to that is no. You do not lose any rights. It doesn't change your position with regards to the overall divorce case. Again, like Mali said, it's not unusual for a judge to order one party to remain in the home and then one party to move out. And there's a lot of factors that are taken into consideration, both financial and with regards to child custody and those sorts of things. And so, if you're ordered after a temporary hearing to live in another place outside the marital residence, you're not costing yourself anything with regards to your equitable division interest in that home. It doesn't mean that the person that stays in it on a temporary basis is going to stay in it on a final basis necessarily. It's just a thing that we do while a case is pending for two people who cannot live under the same roof, and we've got to get them to the end one way or another. And sometimes separation is the safest emotional way to do that.
Agreed. I think that typically if one person's going to stay in the home, and one does not, the financial dynamic does change because the other party is typically going to need to go rent something, or sometimes obviously we have clients that have multiple properties, so-and-so can go move into the lake house or whatever. So, that's good if they've got the means to do that, but sometimes they don't. And it's typically turns into a form of, for example, temporary alimony. That, hey, husband, if you're going to move out, she's going to need help to continue paying the mortgage. So you're going to continue making mortgage payments or a portion of it in addition to some child support. So it just depends on the case. But basically just know that there's going to have to be a financial conversation which follows this dynamic shift. As Andee said, one of the most common questions we get is like, if I move out, am I going to get as much of a payout in this asset later in my divorce? And the one thing I'll add to that is that in Georgia, when the courts are looking at equitable division, meaning fair division of the estate, how do we fairly divide the assets? The house is an asset and it's going to have equity in it, and typically. And I have experienced where if the parties have been separated for a long period of time, like 2 years, a longer period of time, just for example, the court is going to pay attention to that. If somebody moved out, kind of started their own life and maybe bought a new house, or they're renting something, or, if they bought a new house, they've put money into that new house, and the other spouse has continued paying the mortgage on the marital residence that they traditionally lived in, the court may give the spouse that has put more money post-separation into that asset, meaning they've continued to nurture the asset, if you will. They've put money into it. The court may give them a little more of the equity in that asset, in that residence, because the other party moved out and this party has continued to maintain that asset. Therefore, out of fairness, the court may give the party a little bit more, but it's so fact specific. It's judge specific. Different judges do it differently. I always say our judges typically like to divide things 50-50, even though in Georgia we're not an automatic 50-50 division state. So just something to be aware of. And yeah, that's kind of topic number 2, or scenario number 2. So let's talk about what happens when, let's say we're at the conclusion of the case and we are now dissolving the marriage and the estate's going to be divided on a final basis. What happens if one spouse keeps the house out of the deal and the other, they're just awarded to keep the marital residence? What do we do financially with that? What does that look like?
So again, there are a lot of, financial considerations that come into play. If the spouse retaining the home is awarded the home in its entirety, usually the value of the home, the equity, is balanced out with the division of other assets. So for instance, if you have the marital residence and you have bank accounts or investment accounts, retirement accounts, the court will balance out the value of the assets that you receive. Sometimes the court will say, yes, party A or party B, you can keep the home, but you need to pay your soon-to-be ex-spouse this amount representing their interest in the equity in the home, and you need to do it within X number of months. And so what that amount is and how long you're given to pay them out will vary based on the facts, very specific facts with regards to income and the value of other assets and your ability to do it and that sort of thing. But you'll be given a period of time to do that. And in every case, judges require that at some point the person keeping the home is going to have to make sure that the other party is removed from the mortgage.
The mortgage, yeah.
So that's my overall advice that I give to clients when they're looking at that and starting to make plans. What about you, Mali?
I start having my clients as early as possible in the case. If they feel like they'd like to keep the marital residence, I get them talking to a mortgage broker immediately so that they can start to talk about, will I even qualify to refinance to get my spouse's name off the mortgage? Very slim chance, very small percentage of cases, the other side will actually agree to leave their name on the mortgage if you can't qualify, but that's so rare. So if you go to trial, a judge is going to say, you can keep the house, but I'm going to give you, usually they'll say 3 to 6 months to refinance, remove this other person's name from the mortgage. And if you cannot, then you have to sell the house and y'all are going to split the proceeds. And there's all these really, really detailed provisions that would be put into a court order that dictate how the house is sold, how the realtor is picked, how the listing price is chosen, how the sales price is chosen. How do we handle when we need to decrease the listing price? All these things. How to keep the house in marketable condition. How do showings get handled? So it's a very detailed situation. Again, y'all are tired of hearing me say it, but it's a reason why you need a family law attorney that's going to draft that agreement. If y'all agree to these terms or the court order that the judge is going to sign off on, they have to be very specific, because I have dealt with a lot of cases where the wording on how a house is going to get sold or how this equity is going to get paid out, it wasn't done properly. And we're a year later, we're still arguing over it. The house still isn't listed, all because somebody left out a comma or something so silly that could have helped us get this done more smoothly. So another thing is that fairly early on in the process, it really depends on when the mediation is going to be, when these settlement negotiations are happening, and or when the trial is. We're going to get appraisals on the marital residence, and you want to get a really, really, really good appraiser who can do an appraisal on the property that's going to stand up in court. So a lot of times we've got competing appraisals. The spouses have gotten different ones, and so wants it to be a lower value for whatever tactical reasons, and the other one wants it higher for their tactical reasons. And a lot of times it's a lot of arguing over whose appraisal is more accurate. It's appraisers coming to court to testify as to why their appraisal is more accurate. And especially when you've got clients that their marital estate, we've had clients that have got 10, 15 pieces of real property. And so their real property, their residence and any other parcels of property they have are really valuable, and the appraisal really matters. So it's just something to note that your lawyer will talk to you about, so that we're making sure you get what's fair out of the estate. But yeah, that's a very common outcome, that one party keeps the house but has to buy the other one out, remove them from the mortgage.
Absolutely.
And then another, and the last sort of most common scenario that you'll see is that you guys the case is done and you just decide nobody wants this house, so we're going to sell it. And what that normally looks like is kind of like I just described. We've got this very definite language that's structured very carefully about here are the provisions that are going to guide us to this sale and how the sale is going to look. Andee, any points on how that process looks?
Well, I think I absolutely agree with what you previously said, obviously. But, if you both can agree conceptually on what the value of your house is, you don't need to go through the appraisal process. If you both agree that, you're going to sell it, it doesn't necessarily matter, because you're going to divide the equity based on whatever formula we put in the documents and in the manner that we describe in the documents. But we're definitely going to have to think through what is going to be the listing price. And that's where the valuation can be important too, because in this current economy in particular, with real estate values kind of all over the map, no pun, people disagree. People expect a higher return. And so we have to account for that. And our jobs are to address every possible outcome that we can think of that can affect you in order to protect you. And so that's just an added element that we think about. So we'll be looking at that from the very beginning of the case to figure out. I always want to know at the beginning of the case, what is your feeling about the home?
Me too. I totally agree. And a lot of times there's an emotional attachment to the home. I mean, 100% of the time there is. That's our safe place. And it's really difficult to have to accept, okay, I can't keep the house. I can't keep my kids in this school district anymore. It's not financially feasible. But that's where it becomes important to have an advocate and attorney that will talk to you about all the different options, give you your options. That's what I'm saying. We'll get you with a mortgage broker to determine, is this feasible for me? What is my new career going to look like if I'm starting a new career? What are my other options? Do I want to bring in somebody to rent out the basement? Is that something that will help me to afford this, to keep my kid in this school district? That's probably one of the most common concerns is I want my kids to not have to move. I'm willing to shift things around, keep this asset, even though maybe the mortgage is a little too expensive for me. I want to do it for the well-being of my children. We see it a lot, and it is possible, but it just takes a creative team around you to figure out. It would consist of your lawyer, mortgage broker, financial planner, realtor, all these people, so that you could decide what makes the most sense to remove the emotion from this and keep it geared towards business financially. So with that, we're going to leave you to ponder. And thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.